Welcome to Liberate Your People Pleaser. I am Brenda Florida, certified life coach, and you might be a people pleaser if you tend to prioritize other people's wants and needs over your own. If you're the peacemaker, if you're always trying to create harmony with the people that you work with and live with, you probably are also an amazing problem solver. You have great intuition, and you're probably an empath, or at least have great skills of empathy. And the reason why I call this Liberate Your People Pleaser and not Fix Your People Pleaser is there's nothing to fix. There's nothing wrong with you. These are fantastic qualities that you have, really superpowers that you just naturally possess and instinctively use. And what gets problematic about them is when they get turned around on other people all the time and not on yourself. And what do I mean by that? Empathy. You can understand how another person feels, you understand their perspective, or you can put yourself in their shoes. And when you do that, you may be prone to giving up your own feelings, your own position, your own perspective, and you make theirs more important. So you're prioritizing what they feel or think or their position over your own. And that's when things start to go awry for us. And so in this podcast, each episode, we'll talk about different ways that we can power up those great skills that we have and use them for ourselves first, and then give to others out of that fullness, rather than prioritizing everyone else. So it doesn't make us selfish when we stop prioritizing everybody else. What it does is allows us to have the power that we need internally, the confidence and the clarity that we need internally, to then go impact the world in an even more powerful way. So I'm Brenda Florida, certified life coach, and I'm so glad you're with us. Let's liberate your people pleaser. Hello and welcome to this episode of Liberate Your People Pleaser. Today, yes, we're talking about people pleasing in the bedroom. So put on your headphones if you want to, or whatever, if you have delicate ears around you, because we're going to speak truthfully and frankly, as I always do. So when we talk about people pleasing and the bedroom, a couple of things come up, and we're going to do more than one podcast episode about this topic because it's a topic near and dear to my heart. And I'll tell you a story in a minute for why that is. But I want for you today, as we enter this arena, to think about pleasure. Okay. So obviously we want our time in the bedroom having sex to be pleasurable. Now I realize that's not a given. And there are a lot of people having a lot of not pleasure in the bedroom. Okay. But I also want to think beyond just something sexual and moving in or including into our conversation the sensual, anything that has pleasure, just experiencing our body, the scent of a rose, the feeling of things, tactical, kind of kinesthetic things, and how what gives us pleasure visually. So this is sort of a permission for pleasure. So that's what I want you to give yourself, is just sort of this blanket permission to start noticing the things that give you pleasure, and then by contrast, the things that don't. And you will start to find probably all kinds of things in your environment, from the very small, the kind of paper you write on, the kinds of pens you use, the cover on your laptop, the anything, your file folders, that just don't give you pleasure. Okay. They may not be a problem, so you don't do anything about it. But I will tell you, every time I go to my file folders, because I still have some things that I need paper, file folders for, or client notes and things like that I keep in folders, I buy beautiful file folders. I mean, it's not hard. You can get them on Amazon, at a minimum, different colored ones, or, you can go more exotic than that. And I've had file folders with Eiffel Towers on them, and African animals and all kinds of different things because I love that sort of stuff. And even when you have something as seemingly mundane as the folders that are in your filing cabinet be something that give you pleasure, it changes your world. And we all know that what's happening with us sexually is a lot bigger than the act of sex. Okay. And so these are the kinds of things when we start to give ourselves permission to have pleasure. So again, as a people pleaser, you've probably been overly focused on what gives other people pleasure. What kinds of foods do your family members like to eat or your friends like to eat? Or what kind of, office supplies does your business partner like or not like, or they don't value that. So they're not going to spend the extra $5 on the color folders or, whatever it is. You're used to prioritizing the other instead of yourself. And so this pleasure is always about prioritizing what we want and what we like. All right. And it doesn't turn us into selfish bitches or beasts. It, in fact, allows us to be the most giving from the most pure place. So I want to hear as we dive into, especially on the podcast topics, that when we talk about sex, this is true for every topic, but I want you to ask me your questions. So every week in the show notes on every podcast episode is a link where you can ask me a question. It's private to me. Identity, let me say that the other way. Sorry. I can keep your identity private, but I want to know what questions you have or what, problem you have, or if you don't agree with something I've said, that's fine too, like whatever, so that I can come to these podcasts with information and, kind of details about the topics that will be really helpful to you. That's why I'm here. I do this every week for you guys, so that you can hear things that will really help you. Yes, I want to inspire you. Yes, I want to have meaningful conversations, and I want to give you things that will be really practical for you. So please, to ask me your questions that have to do with your situation where maybe you're not sure how what I'm talking about would fit, or, whatever it may be. Let me tell you a story so you can kind of get my perspective of my relationship with sex and with my own pleasure. So when I was a little girl, about 5 years old, I was sexually abused. Now, I repressed that memory because it felt so unsafe for me to share that with anybody until I was in my early 30s. And then it came to me in a flashback, memory. I was about to go to sleep one night and it just all of a sudden I remembered it and I could see myself there. And part of the experience, not all the details. Not all the details are still not known to me in a conscious way, but I very much remembered that abuse. And so that obviously rocked my world to remember that and have the sort of trauma of remembering that. Thankfully, I was already in therapy. So, I went to my therapist with it right away and we worked with that. In a lot of way, it made sense out of a lot of ways that my marriage was dysfunctional sexually, because all of a sudden, through the lens of a little, girl who had been sexually abused, the way I was with my husband sexually made more sense, which was that I never wanted to have sex. Okay. It was basically it. So basically, we had a story in our marriage that we both, sort of bought into unconsciously, that our sexual problems, which were not having sex hardly ever, that was all my fault, that was because of me. And that was kind of our story long before I knew there was any sexual abuse in my background. So I'm sure you can relate to this. It may be a different topic, but often in marriages for sure, but even in other relationships, it can even happen in the workplace in a little different way. We end up with this sort of unconscious collusion to believe in something, sort of a collective belief without saying it, right? We never sat down at the table one night and my husband and I said, yes, our sexual problems are because of me, but that was sort of the story. I was the one, after all, saying no. So I started healing from that trauma. As I'm in my 30s as an adult, our marriage was already having some challenges. Um, it never really got better on any of the arenas. Sexually was only one of them. And so by the time I was leaving my first marriage, I thought I was frigid. I mean, that was my own sort of self-diagnosis, was just that I don't like to have sex. And, sure, I could understand why, because I had this, sexual abuse when I was young, even though I knew plenty of other sexually abused people who didn't hate having sex like I did. So that didn't totally explain it. But I just sort of, this is how that sense of identity, this is how that sense of identity happens within us, that can be very false. It can feel very much like, well, this is just who I am. I would have said, well, I'm just frigid. I don't like sex. Like, I don't know why, but I just don't, that's who I am. And I was so, one of the things I thought when I was getting divorced was, yay, I never have to have sex again, or say no to somebody, or deal with the issue of sex again. Uh, um, so that's where I was. Then fast forward, and we won't go into all the stories in one podcast, but fast forward until I was, just 3 or 4 years from when that memory came up. I was 36. I had left my marriage, and I had my first boyfriend. And come to find out, I wasn't frigid at all. And I started to understand that there were a whole lot of things that were creating problems in the sexual relationship that my first husband and I had, that had nothing to do with me and my abuse. They were about the intimacy or lack thereof in our relationship emotionally. They were about, frankly, him being a terrible lover. I probably wasn't an outstanding one. Um, but maybe we might agree that it takes a little more nuance and, skill to be a good lover to a woman. And it's pretty straightforward with a guy. But at any rate, I was no, prize, I'm sure, in the bedroom either, as far as skill, because we knew nothing. We were virgins when we got married. We, my God, we would never watch porn or something like that, because we were, super religious, and all that was a sin. And then there's all the religious shame around sex and enjoying sex and pleasure and all that. So long story short, from, like my mid 30s, I was about 36, I think, the first time I had sex with my boyfriend, to, today, at the ripe old age of young age of 60, I have opened up significantly to pleasure and my own sexual life. And it starts with me, right? So that's what I want you to get out of this, and this permission for pleasure. As I started exploring and opening up to who I really might be sexually and in the world of pleasure, I could, once I had this really, great sexual experience, and a number of them with this boyfriend, like consistently, I couldn't have that identity anymore of, I'm frigid, I don't like sex, this just isn't my thing, right? So it kind of shattered that identity I had, and I had to go find out who I really was. And that's the thing. There's so many things that we think that's just who I am, and it's not. It's who you've practiced being. It's who you've been habituated into being, but it isn't the truth of who you are. And so we are beings that have been created for many things, but one of those things is pleasure. Your body, especially for those of you listening who are women, my goodness, we have, I don't know what the number is, but it's tens of thousands of nerves that are just for pleasure, more actually than men have. But whatever, this isn't a male female, battle of the most pleasure nerves. Um, any of us, male or female, can get very disconnected from what brings us pleasure. And so I want you to start way before we get to the bedroom, right? Like just start noticing what feels good on your body, clothes that you like to wear, how they feel, the socks you wear, the underwear you wear, the lotion you put on your body, or the scent of the shampoo you use, or, perfumes and stuff. Obviously, if you like to do that, your sheets. Oh my gosh, what kind of sheets do you really like? Like there's so many things that we can be in the habit of ignoring and not paying attention to. Does this really give me pleasure? You know, the food you eat, it's all the senses. I really just want you to give yourself permission to explore the sensual, pleasurable side of your life. And yes, of course, it flows into the bedroom as well. But the door opens before we get to the bedroom. And so I really want to hear what you think about this. I really want to see if you can open yourself up to maybe the way you think you are is not all there is to how you are. Okay. And to really start paying attention to what your pleasures are. So the trick here again, as people pleasers, it's really easy to adopt. I have been the most guilty of this. Adopt what, my husbands have liked, my girlfriends have liked, what Oprah says is great. So it must be like whatever. Okay. Any sort of influencer you follow on Instagram or whatever, that, oh, these are supposed to be the best PJs or the best sheets or the best bras or whatever. And I try them and I don't like them. And either, now in the old days, I don't do this anymore. In the old days, I would either think kind of like, well, what's wrong with me? Everybody else thinks this is so great. It must be me who's off. Or I would just wear it because whatever, it's supposed to be great. So it must be great. And, not even tune into the fact that I didn't even think it was great. Now I don't do that. I don't care if 100 million reviews said this was the softest nightgown ever. If I buy it and I don't think so, I will send it back. I don't need to think it's the softest nightgown ever. But these things, like that might sound silly to you, and you might be saying, well, of course, Brenda, I would send it back too. But I promise you, there are all kinds of insidious ways that this idea of just doing things or liking things the way somebody else around you wants it because it pleases them have taken over. And you have sort of, it's almost like forgetting. You've forgotten what it is that actually brings you pleasure. That is a little distinction that, you like it. You may like the thing, like you may like banana bread, but you like yours warm with butter on it, right? And you might have a spouse that is like, oh, you don't need to do that. That's excessive, or, whatever. And it doesn't matter because you get to choose your pleasure, whatever it is that's unique to you in every area of your life. But we can't choose it until we know it. So I want you to really experiment with pleasure and with this idea of seeing yourself as a sensual being. So this is even things like if you put body lotion on, like notice what it feels like to touch your own skin. Notice what that lotion smells like, what the consistency of, how does it feel on your skin? Because it may, smell wonderful, be very popular. You've used it for years and you realize you actually don't like the way it feels once you get it on your skin. It feels sticky, or it feels, whatever, greasy, or any number of things. Then just give yourself permission to switch and start using something else and experiment with several products until you find one that you really like, whatever. It's not silly. The small things add up to the big things. And so I can't wait to hear what your experience with this is. And if it's a challenge for you, or if you were surprised by some of the things that came up for you. So be sure and put any of that in the comments below that you want to share, or email it to me, Brenda@brendaflorida.com. And please click that link in the show notes and ask me your question about this or any other topic. So I will see you in the next episode of Liberate Your People Pleaser. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Liberate Your People Pleaser. As I mentioned at the end of this episode, I have a new coaching package I call the Power Package. This is for everybody who wants to turn up the light on that dimmer switch and regain your sense of personal power. Anything, we can work on any issue that's taking your power away. It could be your kids, it could be your job, it could be your finances, it could be a relationship, it could be something just from your past that keeps zapping you and you can't seem to get rid of it. We'll work with that very specifically and very intimately, working with me one-on-one. That's why I love one-on-one packages, because it's not a formula. It is diving into what specifically has triggered you and what will specifically for you regain that sense of power. It's already there. It's not outside of you. You already have it. It's just sort of gotten lost or covered up or whatever word you want to use. And we will together uncover it, find it, access it, so you can turn up the light on that dimmer switch and live in the power and possibility that is already within you. So I've got the link in the show notes for the Power Package, so you can check that out. There's 2 versions. You can book a call with me if you're not sure which one's right for you. So just go check all that out and then get in touch with me if you have any questions. And then of course, there's the private Facebook group, Liberate Your People Pleaser. I'll have the link to that in the show notes. And you can always ask me a question that you want me to address on Liberate Your People Pleaser, or send me an email. My email is also in the show notes, Brenda@brendaflorida.com. And let me know what's helped you in these podcasts, what you're still struggling with. I am here to be your partner on the journey. So thank you for joining me in this episode of Liberate Your People Pleaser.